Thank you, Ann. Bringing to order this meeting of the Select Board, Wednesday, December 20th, it being 6:30. Thank you all for being accommodating for the date and time change. At this time, if you're able, would you stand to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We start every meeting with open forum. Is there anyone here for open forum? No? All right, thank you. And as a reminder, these meetings are recorded and live streamed by Westborough TV. With that, we will move to item number 2 on our agenda, 2024 renewals and liquor license and hotel innkeeper licenses. The first restaurant listed on our agenda tonight, Chengdu Restaurant, will not be here. They have resolved issues related to their licenses and are all set. With that, I'll hand it over to our town manager.
Sure. So each year the businesses renew their licenses through our office. One of the requirements of receiving their license is a completed inspection. So you have someone before you. Owen O'Leary's is here because they're attempting to renew their liquor license. In the case of a liquor license, the law is more prescriptive, where you need to pass your inspection in order to be handed your license. And then the extended stay Americas at 1800 Computer Drive and 19 Connector Road. Those are hotel innkeeper licenses. We have representation here from both the building department. We have our building commissioner, Fred Leonardo, and then also the fire department with our deputy chief, Steve Doucette, is here, so they can speak to anything that's outstanding related to the inspections. I believe that they've visited all of these businesses as recently as today. So I don't know if you might want to start by having them come up and speak to the issues, and start with Owen O'Leary's.
All right, thank you. Is there someone here from Owen O'Leary's? Hello, would you like to come up to the microphone? Hello.
Just
Hello.
you could,
Oh, you want to move the mic towards,
there we go.
so
Thank you.
folks on TV can hear you, and just give us your name.
How's that?
That's great.
Better. Oh, sorry, if you want to give us your name. And
Okay. My name is Kevin Gill. I'm the owner of Owen O'Leary's. We opened the first one 35 years ago, and we opened the last one here in Westborough 10 years ago. So far, so good. I was determining what happens tonight, though.
I'll get you just curious as to, I guess, what the issues were and why you're having difficulty.
I do have here, if you want me to go through it, it's kind of the correspondences I've had with my sprinkler company. My sprinkler company has been bought out, and it's created a time frame where there was no communication of the sprinkler company getting back in touch with me. It all started back in, 2021. We purchased 54, I believe, sprinkler heads, of which we thought all were installed. We've come to find out 9 were not installed. We were unaware of that until a recent fire alarm, when the fire department came in and informed me that there were holes in the ceiling without sprinkler heads. And yes, they were correct. I think that was around August 1st. I started communicating with the sprinkler company at that point in time. They sent someone out, invoiced me $2,500. I assume it's all set. That was August 18th. I look up 5 days later, they fixed a couple of leaks in the attic. I call them again. Finally, I get someone out on September 8th, thereabouts. Again, not all set. I thought it was all set. I call them again. They finally come out on September 18th. I pay them $2,500 again. I assume I'm all set. And on September 26th, this time I go up, I look. It's not all set. Again, they fix leaks in the attic.
Thank you.
Then I start trying to get in touch with them. I'm on the verge of being closed. The chief gave me 30 days to take care of this matter. It's now been 55 days. I don't feel like, I don't want to close. I have 40 employees. I don't want them to lose their job. What are you guys going to, no one's getting back to me. Come to find out, they were purchased by a larger company called Encore. So probably 1st of November, I give up on my company. I start calling Encore, and then things start happening. They said they'll be in tomorrow morning to finish all the work that hasn't been done. They'll easily be done tomorrow, so they tell me. And that's where I'm at. I tried. I mean, I can show you all the proof, but basically what I just told you is the Reader's Digest of what transpired over 90 days.
So you're expecting them to be in tomorrow?
8 a.m. tomorrow. They've ordered the stuff, which they told me twice before. The new company, Encore Fire Protection, said the stuff came in on Monday. They applied for the building permit on Monday. The building department turned it around and issued it yesterday, and now they're coming in Thursday to finish the job. Coming in tomorrow.
Yeah. All right, thank you very much. I know, Fred, if you want to, or Steve, I don't know who would.
Fred Leonardo, Community Development Director for Westborough. Excuse me, I'm passing away here. Yeah, Kevin kind of gave you the synopsis. So the chief and I were out Monday. We had discussion about what was going on. I was back out there today. He's got a couple other minor things he's got to take care of. The biggest issue is the lack of, or I shouldn't say lack, my apologies, missing sprinkler heads. And we know what that could happen because we had it happen in our own building next door, so that's kind of where we're at. We knowingly can't sign off the license, my apologies, the permit itself, the annual inspection, until that's done. That's the single biggest item. So that's where we're at.
Sounds like it's moving discussions. We hear the synopsis. You're in agreement, as you said, with that.
Yeah,
Sounds like you're on top of it too. You're out there as necessary. You're turning the permits around to help out.
Right. That's correct. So hopefully by beginning of next week, all items will be corrected and we can do a final inspection and say that the annual certificate's all set.
Fred, what are the other issues that are open?
There was an emergency light that has to be correct. One of the bulbs is out.
Okay.
There was one other.
There's a sprinkler head in the freezer with ice. I didn't want to touch it because the company's coming out tomorrow.
Understood.
I was afraid to thaw the freezer. I didn't know what would happen.
Yeah, understood.
But they're coming tomorrow.
Okay.
Yeah, so as stated, it's the sprinkler heads were the most important thing. The other stuff is he needs a bulb and
Okay.
the other head.
All right. Thank you very much, and thank you for explaining the situation. Yeah, it seems apparent that you're making every effort. Any other?
No, I just didn't know if I didn't
Steve,
know
do
if
you have anything to
Steve,
add?
Deputy Chief.
Stephen Doucette, Deputy Fire Chief. I do have a letter here from Encore Sprinkler dated December 14th with the scope of work, which includes replacing 10 dry pendants, performing a 5-year annual inspection of the wet system, the dry system, the backflow, and looks like they're replacing a couple of gauges. So we do have a letter. There's a permit that was approved by the fire department and by Fred Leonardo.
Excellent. Thank you.
So thank you for all that information, and I certainly appreciate you coming before us. My question is more on the town side of things. Missing sprinkler heads concern me, so I don't know if it's the type of thing that happened years ago. O'Leary building was Piccadilly Pub, What is the process, and is it missing sprinkler heads in the sense that it's new code, new level code that requires some new location, or is it they were just missing from the outset? And how do,
They were outdated, so they were sent out to test.
oh,
The test failed, so they asked us to replace them all. I was hoping they'd ask me to replace a couple, but no, it was 54, replaced 54 heads, and 45 were replaced,
okay,
Oh, okay.
which we thought all 54 were replaced.
okay.
So
yeah,
that's
that-
why, you know, the building hasn't had proper coverage almost for 2 years, but for that reason, everyone thought they were replaced until we had that fire alarm, and,
Okay.
you know, that once,
Nothing's happening.
yeah,
Okay,
that's kind of what it was.
that helps. Thank you very much. I
Yep.
just wanted to better understand what kind of led us to this point, but thank you. And thank you, Fred and Steve.
Can I make a motion?
I mean, through
Um,
the chair, yes, you can. I'm like, yes, you can.
So I would move to release the 2024 liquor license and common vittler permit for Owen O'Leary's Restaurant at 17 Connector Road, contingent on the business passing an annual inspection and being issued a certificate of inspection.
Second.
Can I just ask a question? Should we have any dates in that motion?
Well, I think it has to be done by December 31st.
December 31st.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
So,
For
so
liquor
the board
license.
doesn't typically hear renewals because it was delegated to me,
Right.
but because we had issues, we've been bringing them to you in the past couple of years.
Okay.
So, but yeah, it's December 31st is the date.
Okay, and just so we're all clear, if for some reason, and I certainly hope this doesn't happen, knock on wood, if something, Encore doesn't do what they need to do, the permit isn't closed out to your satisfaction, talking with town staff.
Yeah, if they don't sign off on the inspection, then the license won't be released, so they wouldn't be able to operate.
Okay, okay. All right, well, we're gonna hope for
As of beginning of
good,
date, January
we're gonna hope for good things tomorrow.
Yes, fingers crossed.
Yeah.
All right. Motion and a second. All those in favor? 5-0. Thank you very much for
Thank you.
coming tonight.
Good luck.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't know if it's the same party for the next two. Extended Stay America at 1800 Computer Drive, a hotel innkeeper license, and Extended Stay America at 19 Connector Road for a hotel innkeeper license.
And Sean, if I may, if there are different issues, can we take them separately? Thanks.
Good evening.
Ryan Bogley, general manager of both hotel locations. I'm here in place of my district manager, Joffrey, who could not be here this evening.
Thanks for coming. If you want to walk through, I guess, the issue, what's
I mean, there's
causing-
issues at both hotels that I think Joffrey was trying to resolve. I mean, they know a lot more than what I do. We uploaded everything last night. Me and Joffrey uploaded every file that we had, and we paid for the license yesterday. We've been working on some things. We have work orders for some other things, like the doors. We're trying to get the permits. There's an issue at both hotels with doors that were installed with not having permits for those. So we have the vendor reaching out to do that. That's finite, I believe. Other than that, it's kind of like I'm kind of in here in the place of Joffrey. Joffrey was really supposed to be here. He has the handle and the person who does all that. He's my district manager, so.
Can we hear from the staff?
Yeah, we
Yep.
need to hear from Fred.
Fred, you want to say, I don't know if Fred or Steve wants to start. Fred, Pete?
Sure. Fred Lenaro, Community Development Director for Westborough.
It's a hard one tonight.
Yeah, I'm having difficulty, sorry. So Ryan's the manager of both hotels, 19 and 18. We can talk to them separately. As of today, we actually got the electronic permit for the annual inspection, so we didn't have any written information prior to today. I just very briefly went through 19 Connector. There are some deficiencies on the fire alarm report. There was a few smoke detectors that were not passed by their inspection. So the expectation was those should be corrected and we should have an updated report. The report that was updated was 11 months old, so I don't know if they've made the correction since the last report. We don't have anything more recent than that. The fire sprinkler report for Connector seemed to be fine. That passed. There were some other relatively less important matters that were cited at 19. The door permit was for both, so they replaced the front entrance doors. There's a vestibule, so there's a door on either side. It's a sliding door. They never obtained a building permit to do that work at both 19 and at 1800 Computer Drive. They removed an exit sign as part of the door, at least at 19. I actually didn't go to 18 personally. They can do that, but they should really tell us as part of the building permit why it's allowed under the code, so we can document all that. So they have not applied for the building permit yet. As I understand, they go through a work permit process, or
Yeah, so how it works is when the building needs something, I log into an online portal, which is our VX Maintain Varian website. I put in what needs to get done, and that gets outsourced to an outside vendor. So if I put anything in for doors, anything like a tub replacement, anything like that, gets outsourced to a company called Finite, and they're our third-party vendor. If it gets approved for the work, they come in. So when it comes to the building and permits, they're supposed to pull their own permits. We believe that they were pulling their permits, is what Joffrey wanted me to say. They said they reapplied for the permit this week. They said they were trying to get me proof of that. Did not get proof of that as of 6 o'clock. I just checked my email. But they said they were in the process of doing that. But that's a third-party company, unfortunately. Like I said, that all goes through a corporate-wide thing. All I do as a manager, and Tara does the same thing as a manager in-house, if something needs to get worked on, we say, hey, we have a leak, we have this, and it gets outsourced to a third party, all through a third-party portal. So I don't have a way to call somebody and be like, hey, I need a plumber to come now. We have to do it all through this third-party portal.
And it's my understanding you have no time frame for
The door permits?
the door permits. Do you have a time frame for correction of the fire alarm, the smoke detectors that failed?
The smoke detectors that failed was in-house, so those have probably been resolved, especially because the report was from 11 months ago. All my in-room smoke detectors, as I was last known, have all been working productively. We do a 1-month check around the hotel. My maintenance guys do on site. They check every single smoke alarm inside the rooms. So by my understanding, those are all complete and up to par. But when it comes down to the building, the door permits, it's all through the vendor, really. We're waiting on the vendor to get us that permit for that door. So I do not have a time frame on that specifically.
But you said they were supposed to.
Yeah, my recent communication with my district manager and him, the owner of Finite today, was that they paid for the permit. That's kind of where it draw the line. There was a long text feed. Was running 3 hotels. I was helping run East Main Street today too, so I was all around. But as of right now, I don't have, I can't say we're going to have a permit by Friday or Tuesday or anything like that. So they're working their best. Bill Bianchi, who's our regional asset manager for the whole East Coast, is trying to have it to me by Friday, but he didn't want to guarantee that in front of the board.
And Fred, I guess, it sounded like you went out to at least one of the sites to look at the door that was installed, realizing that there hasn't been a permit pulled yet, right?
that is correct.
But, we're not talking about a door that is inappropriate for that facility. I mean, I'm just curious as to whether or not they're in violation from the perspective of they replaced a door with a door that is not working, appropriate for that building.
No, I think the door's okay, albeit the wind yesterday kept blowing open, so I don't know how functional this thing is. They may have some problems, they may have to come back, and it literally just kept swinging open, so I had some concerns about that, but, no, I think the door itself's okay, but I didn't really, test the emergency component of it itself. It is their main door.
Right. You'll still go out
We
and
will go
inspect
out.
it once you've got the permit and,
Yes,
okay.
yes. But to be,
We replaced the door because we did not have an ADA door before, so anybody with a wheelchair or crutches could not just walk in. They'd have to push the door open by hand. So that's why they upgraded to the ADA door
Good.
that opens itself.
And Fred, sorry. No, go ahead. To the smoke detector, just because I guess probably not putting 2 and 2 together. So you said that there was the report uploaded, which was from about 11 months ago.
Right.
They fixed it in-house, but How do you need do they need to get an inspection? Do you go and inspect, or how?
No, so their fire alarm company goes in to, according to the report, they went into each and every room and checked these things, except for one room they couldn't get into for whatever reason. Their alarm company, the ones that noted the deficiency back in January of '23, I do not have any follow-up paperwork that somebody's gone in and repaired those. So typically, we would get a follow-up report that somebody's repaired them and they are now pass, quote-unquote pass.
So.
And does that have to,
Second.
does that have to come from that fire alarm company? Can that come from management? How does?
Typically,
usually
we would look for it from the fire alarm company they'd hired to do the inspection.
Okay.
That's what we would typically look for.
Come back out for a one-room smoke alarm.
Well, in this case,
Yes.
it was more than one room, but again, when they do the new report, everything should be hunky-dory. I mean, we could talk about that, but typically it's been from the company that we've gotten the report from, because they're the one testing it for us. We don't, I won't speak for the fire department.
Well-
Maybe they go out and test it. I
Well,
wouldn't.
and they're
the
also,
fire
it's
alarm
also,
company is licensed
Right.
and certified to do those inspections.
you're also paying a service for them.
Yeah. And they're licensed and certified so that they're insured, so that if they say something passes and it shouldn't have passed, they hold the liability. I would think the building owners and managers would want to have them come out, even if it's only for 1 or 2 or 3 smoke detectors.
Yeah, I can't speak on that. That's Joffrey and above.
So I don't know what their policy is on that. We need a clean bill of health. We wouldn't normally sign off based on that. So when we went out last year, well, I shouldn't assume anything. Presumably, we would have had a clean bill of a report. So we take it within the last 12 months. So if this had come in, even though it was January of '23, late January, if it had said everything was clear, we would accept that. And technically, they wouldn't be out until January of '24, but if we do the inspection in December,
Right.
we're kind of hoping we're okay. But in this case, as I said, nothing points to us that it's been corrected since January of '23, albeit it may have been.
You just need confirmation.
Yes, I can't, yes, that's exactly right. I don't know any more than what they tell us or give us for reports. That's why we ask them in the annuals. I don't know what else to say beyond that, but as I said, I don't want to speak for the fire department. I don't know if they would go out and individually test those.
Now, Fred, you mentioned that you really just received the full application. I guess it uploaded last night. You received it this morning?
Sometime today, I actually virtually looked at it as I was sitting in the back.
Got it. So part of it is you're sort of validating all of this on short notice here at the end of the year.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, unfortunately, the way annuals go, we start the process in October, November, and generally every year, here we are.
So this is my first year fully managing this, so I set a Google Calendar. I set a Google Calendar for next August to get this stuff underway, so it doesn't take this late in the year. This is my
Thank you.
first time managing both these properties and doing this myself, so yes, I did upload them just last night with Joffrey, because this is my first go-around doing this, so realistically, I did not know any of this until about a few weeks ago, so.
Got it.
So, if I may, how many units are in these hotels, and is there a current occupancy rate? And my understanding is also that there are some long-term tenants, I'll call them for lack of a better word, in these
Yes.
facilities?
Majority of our tenants are long-term, yes. We have 112 rooms at Computer Drive and 92 rooms at Connector Road.
Okay. And your current occupancy?
Current occupancy, as of today, was about 68% in each hotel.
Okay.
Sometimes it fluctuates. On Friday nights, we can get up to 80, 90% right now. It was a little bit more this week with the storm. We had a bunch of tree companies come and stay. So our occupancy did jump. Majority of this year, from April to October, we were almost 100% every single night, providing for the families in town. We housed all the people from the Worcester housing when the fires went up in Worcester. So it's typically what we do. Most of our tenants are long terms.
Christie, my understanding, again, going back to the previous vote, is that, we can't do anything beyond the end of the year. December 31st, this is either taken care of or it's not taken care of?
You have a bit more discretion with the innkeeper licenses.
Okay.
If what the board has done in the past is, as long as there's no life safety issues, you might schedule them to come back at your January meeting. So provide them with the license or allow them to continue, come back at the January 9th meeting, and provide an update. But that's typically at the recommendation of your fire and building departments.
Okay.
Deputy Chief, I don't know if you have any comments regarding this? Thank you.
I'll just add one more thing for the record. We are still looking for a private fire hydrant test by a third-party vendor. Not sure if it was done. If it was done, we don't have a report.
At what
So this
property?
is something we've been cracking down on the last couple of years because...
The annual fire hydrants right here for both hotels.
You do? Okay. Do you
What-
mind if I just take a look at them and then I'll speak on that?
Okay.
This is for 19 Connector Road.
Can we ask Fred then, comment of,
If any of the outstanding issues are life safety.
yeah.
Yeah, while
Fred?
he's doing that.
Do you consider any of the outstanding issues, particularly with the smoke detector, as a life safety issue?
Certainly, the smoke detectors are a major concern. There is an electrical room door that was sprung, that wasn't working as of Monday. I don't know if that's been repaired.
We did order the part for that. There was a hinge to close the door completely. It only closes when you pull it.
Yeah, it's not, I mean, we're not looking to vacate the hotels, let me put it that way. I don't want to speak for the fire department, but I don't know if we think it's an imminent danger,
Bless
like that somebody's gonna,
So if
I
we,
don't know.
Can-
so we've been
If-
operating,
Sorry,
Yeah.
I was just want to say that if there was an immediate threat,
shut it down.
certainly
We
we
would
would
have
shut
shut
down
them down.
already.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
I think that would be a fair statement from both our departments.
okay. So to the town manager's comment, if we were to make a motion to, in essence, allow but ask to come back for the 9th meeting, and if everything's resolved, similar to what we had with Chengdu tonight, we can get the report that everything resolved and you don't have to be here. It gives a few weeks. I know it's the holidays, but hearing what you said, that would be my view. I know we did this last year too. It is, it sounds like progress is being made. You've told us that. Hopefully, that's the truth. We can't confirm it, and I know you can't. I'm assuming it's the truth. I'd be willing to do that and have it come back on the 9th, and hopefully things are completed or well on their way to completion. I know this was the process we went through last year with another establishment.
The only thing, yes, I have no objections to that. We were talking about them separately, so I just want to be clear. Again, it's possible I missed something, but 1,800, it doesn't look like the fire alarm report that we got for that was actually filled out. So it doesn't look like it's completed, so I don't know where that stands. That may or may not have more outstanding issues, I don't know. That I just would want to have some comfort level that actually is not like way out of whack.
Right.
The sprinkler report and the fire alarm on 19, at least I have some comfort level that we're talking about a few rooms. And the sprinkler report was fine. I'm not as confident on that with 1,800. But we can follow that up locally. Certainly, if we think there is something of imminent danger, then we'll follow that up.
Okay.
Can I just ask a clarification
Sure.
to, and Ryan, I'm sorry, I missed your last name when you introduced yourself, so. Oh, okay. So just to clarify, you had said that you have maintenance crew staff who they do every month they do a check on the
So we
room?
we have a maintenance engineer on site. So we do safety checks where they go through and look at door locks on the back of the doors, make sure those are present, and to check the smoke alarms and the CO2 alarms to see if we need to order any or replace batteries.
Okay. And so if they were doing that work, then this deficient one would have been
Would have
noticed.
been captured I understand what the concern is. I saw the report. Even I asked Joffrey as well. I said, this fire report is from January of
Yeah.
23.
Yeah.
And so, yes, I believe my staff is on point when it comes to that
Yep.
stuff, especially at 1800 Computer Drive. James has been around for 10 years in maintenance doing this, so he's on top of everything. And we have Hack at 19 Connector Road, who does the things that we ask him to do. They follow a strict procedure, which is called Green Shield with ESA. It's their safety procedure of the hotel, things they have to do monthly. That is all logged into a binder, and something we stay on top of. So if a smoke detector is deficient when we're doing our PMs, which is preventative maintenance in rooms, those have all been taken care of at that time.
Okay.
We would never walk away from a smoke detector that's not working. If I don't have a way to fix it that day, I put that room out of order, vacant, until I can get that fixed.
Okay. Okay. Well, okay.
Any other questions? Ian, did you want to make that motion, or?
Sure. Make it somewhat different.
So I guess I'm just not, we heard a lot about 19, but just to be clear from our town staff, we don't have a whole lot of information on 1800 at this point regarding whatever deficiencies there are. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's the first
I mean, we
statement.
don't have any updates.
We don't have I don't know that I have updated reports, yes, I
Okay.
apologize. I looked at it
Well-
just tonight, it didn't look like it was filled out. Could be I missed something, though,
Okay.
I won't put it on them yet, but
Yeah.
I wasn't comfortable with the report, what I thought I saw, because it didn't look like it was filled out. So it didn't tell me if there was deficiencies, it didn't say everything passed on the fire alarm part of it.
Yeah, I got that directly from CFP Fire. They sent that to me yesterday. I asked for all the files so I could upload it. So everything I got came directly from CFP.
Okay.
If it wasn't filled out, I can look again as well. And maybe she sent me a blank one by accident and clicked the wrong file. But I will double check into that if it is
Okay.
and re-upload.
Okay. So I think the piece here, and right now, I mean, we're doing the inspections. Their current license extends, I believe, to 12/31.
Mhm.
So the hope is get everything done for
Yeah.
that. So I would say that we, allow them to operate on existing license, but with diligence performed in accordance with our town inspectors, and that we ask for them to come back at our next meeting on Tuesday, January 9th, for an update on the progress. And if everything is signed off and you have your permits, there's no reason, but we'll figure that out. But for right now, if you can put on your calendars for the 9th, and then hopefully you don't have to be here for that.
So we'll
I
just
would
wanna
be
continue.
okay with that.
We'll just want
Okay.
to continue this to a time certain, so
So we'll continue this
to 6:30.
6:30 on
6:30.
January 9th.
Do you want a second for that?
Yes.
Okay. Just a point of discussion. I think it would be helpful if the issues are not resolved, that I would expect to see the district manager here before us. And
Yes, he was supposed to be here
'Kay.
Yesterday, but unfortunately tonight was
Yeah, no, I understand.
senior night and it
Yep.
switched. So
Nope, that's okay. That's okay.
he
If,
was planning to be here.
hopefully you don't
That's
have,
kind of our fault,
if-
too.
I would say that not just the district manager here, but hard evidence that
yeah,
the work is known, it's scheduled, there's a
Yeah.
committed time frame from the vendors. I have to say, being a business owner and understanding how service portals work, I have a level of disbelief that there's no escalation process whatsoever.
Like I said,
That you put in the
I
portal, so
escalate.
whether it's the district manager to the East Coast,
Yeah.
that there wasn't a way to get this moving sooner and faster. You know, when this type of relatively mundane work, right, that has to happen every year,
Yeah.
is essential for keeping your doors open and for keeping the public safe. So it's, you know, if I had made the motion, I would have asked that it be fully resolved by January 9th, because to me, it's, I realize you're new to the building and you're unfamiliar. Well, your regional manager had a responsibility to make sure you were aware and trained and knew what to do, right? So, you know, you're part of an organization for which this should be no question that this work gets done every year for every single property in every jurisdiction. And so the fact that you weren't trained well enough or informed well enough by your managers, they let you down. and have put you, as the manager of these properties, in an awful position. So I will defer to my fellow select board members that either, if no permits, then by January 9th, then we really need to know exactly when that work's going to be completed.
Yeah, that's my explanation. Maybe I didn't say it clearly, but I mean, the expectation is that these will all be completed, and if they're not completed, we have permits and schedules of kind of why they're not completed, but they're in progress. So everything is scheduled, and I think we've done that in the past. We don't like doing it, but from what I heard, it sounds like there's a process you guys have been talking it, but our expectation is that we don't need to see you on January 9th because everything's complete, and if it's not, you come with the reason it's not, but also the fact that it's scheduled and going. So that's, I don't know how,
That
Yeah.
works?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, the motion is clear and the intent has been expressed. Yep.
And I would just ask that next year, to Alan's point, this is a yearly process. Sounds like you've got.
That's why I said I made a calendar for myself
Yep.
next year to
Just-
start this process early.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you.
Shouldn't be coming to us on the 11th hour.
you don't
or
want to
something.
be here. We don't want you here. You don't want to be here either, I know, so.
Yeah.
So did you second
I did
that?
second, yep.
Okay. All those in favor of the motion? 5-0. Thank you very much for
Thank
coming
you.
this evening. Item number 3, stormwater utility rate setting presentation and discussion.
Okay, good evening. Chris Payant, Director of Public Works. You may recall that in March of this year at town meeting, a bylaw was approved that allowed the town to establish a stormwater utility. So that utility allows the town to collect fees related to stormwater use or effects and then put that money to use to address stormwater issues. So following town meeting, we moved into implementation, and over the last several months, we've been working on refining data and refining the work that was done leading up to town meeting. So at this point, tonight, we're here to provide an update on that implementation and specifically talk about the refinements to the data and what that means in terms of the revenue we expect to generate, and talk about rate setting, which you as the select board have the authority to approve. And so the intent is to come back to you in January, hopefully, and get those rates approved. So tonight, Rich, who from Woodard & Kern, who we've been working with since the beginning of this, is going to present this data in hopefully about 20, 25 minutes or so, and then we'll have some time for discussion and questions. Over to Rich.
Okay. Good evening. Nice to see you again. Rich Niles of Woodard & Kern. For those of you viewing that don't know me. So like Chris said, we're just going to give an overview of the work that's been done and really focus on the financial analysis. So with that, there were some data updates. We're going to talk about the revenue requirements just to refresh a little bit. And then what it means in terms of the previously identified billing rates, that rate structure, and what that means with the new data. And then talk about the approach for credits, as well as touch lightly upon exemptions. So when we look at the overall revenue requirements for the stormwater utility, we have to look at the program budget items, which we developed previously. So none of this has changed since it was presented at town meeting. There's been some adjustments looking at the DPW budget internally in terms of specific items to refine those a little bit, but the overall budget for expenditures is $1.5 million. Same number as before. The pie chart, if you can see it on the right, kind of breaks that down and shows that some part of this is program management, this is administration, regulation and enforcement, small piece of that. The large lion's share of this is capital projects and equipment, and then the next largest is operation and maintenance of the storm drain system, which is cleaning catch basins, sweeping streets, light maintenance work to the infrastructure. So we have what we consider kind of a primary O&M, operation and management budget, is doing those maintenance activities, and then the capital budget, which is construction projects, expenditure of capital, projects that have to be designed and constructed, which again is the lion's share. So those are the kind of the two big items that we're going to talk about a bit more. And so when we look at the revenue requirement, you have expenditures, then you have sort of operating expenses associated with a stormwater utility or an enterprise account. We have to consider other program elements that impact revenue, like credits. If we give credits for private properties that have stormwater systems, that decreases our revenue for the program expenditures, so we have to account for that in the revenue equation. So some assumptions that we made are escalation of operating costs. We assume that inflation is going to continue to occur, so we escalate that. And what we've developed is a cash flow model for the next 5 years for the utility with some of these assumptions. And the additional revenue impacts are credits, bad debt, and these are estimates. So we typically go off of what we've seen with other stormwater utilities in New England, across the nation, kind of standard practice. And so these numbers are in line with that. The 5% capital reserve for that component of the program is something that we understand that the town requires for the other enterprise accounts. So we've assumed that, and we've used an 8% O&M reserve just for unknowns. So all these factors go into what we consider the revenue calculation, and I'll show those numbers in that breakdown shortly. But that $1.5 million expenditure means we have a program budget that's higher than that to account for those revenue requirements. So when we start to recalculate this, the biggest component that has changed is the impervious area for each of the properties that will receive a stormwater bill. So what we did is we refined that impervious area data over the last few months, and we updated what we refer to as non-single family properties, which are anything that aren't single family properties, which could be multifamily, condos, commercial properties. And those are the properties that have typically the largest impervious area per parcel, which means there's the most opportunity for things to vary. And the data, again, this data is originally derived, and the previous numbers that you all saw was based upon satellite imagery, and they use basically AI interpretation of the data to calculate that. Well, we went back and we refined it by actually inspecting the property against the latest aerial imagery and refining those polygons that you see that are light shaded colors on this map. So then we also updated single-family residential properties, but only a certain number of those where they fell along the tier breakpoints. So we have a tiered rate structure for residential. It's 3 tiers. We want to make sure we have a higher degree of confidence that properties are in the right tier. So we look at a certain percentage along that margin, refine that, and we don't need to look at every property, because if it doesn't change enough to move to the next category, it really doesn't matter. So it's just one way to limit the amount of effort and expenditure to refine the data. So that's the sort of the data update. Then we, as part of that, we looked at, just to confirm that these tiers are still appropriate, the original tiers, because the data set did change a bit. But it didn't change dramatically on the residential side, which is good. And we didn't anticipate that it would, but we checked that to make sure. So these breakpoints for the tiers, tier 1 being up to just below 4,000 square feet of impervious area on the parcel. And then tier 2 is 4 to 8,000, and then 8,000 to 10,000 is tier 3. So it still makes sense that this is where these tiers broke in terms of the distribution, which captures the majority of properties in tier 1 and 2, and follows along that average that we saw for single family. And that's how we sort of developed the original rate methodology around tiers, was we looked at the average and then the distribution around that to see what made sense between what we consider small, medium, and large for those different tiers. And then we essentially capped residential and said anything after 10,000 square feet is considered, outside of these tiers, and we calculate that the same as we would for commercial, multifamily. So you could have a single family property that doesn't fall within these 3 tiers. We just calculate the fee differently. So when we run these calculations, again, some of the stuff up top, those bullets are the same as what you've seen before. None of that has changed. I just wanted to have it there for kind of record. So basically what I just explained is how we handle these tiers, and then when we calculate the non-single family properties, we look at a billing unit of 2,000 square feet, divide that into the total impervious area for that property, and that's how we get billing units. So in this table, you see along the top, you see tier 1, 2, 3 for residential, single family. And then we have other residential, which is not single family, could be condos, but it's all residential still. And then we have other properties, which is everything that's not residential. We also broke out municipal separately, because municipal will get charged, and that'll have to come through the general fund to pay that. So we wanted to see what percentage of that, in terms of the revenue makeup to meet that revenue requirement, falls within each of these categories. So as you look down that list, you see the total number of parcels that would get billed, then the billing units associated with those. And so you can see tier 1 single family, it's 1,900 parcels, it's 1,900 billing units because they get one billing unit. And then the revenue per year based upon the rates that we outlined previously, tier 1 would be $4.81 per month per property, and so on. So that's all based upon the original estimates we had. And then so the adjusted revenue based upon the new data is 1.79 million if we keep the rates the same. So what really changed when we updated the data was we had a little bit of shifting amongst properties between tier 1, 2, and 3. So we had a little bit of a decrease to tier 1, we had a little bit of an increase to tier 2, and so those numbers changed a little bit, but not too much. The biggest change was in the all other properties, where the impervious area, we essentially picked up more impervious area that wasn't captured in the digitization process originally, which means you increase your number of billing units, which means that if you keep the rates the same, your revenue increases. So when we originally looked at the program expenditures, the budget and expenditures, when we presented this information earlier this year and then at town meeting, we said we didn't account for revenue impacts. We anticipated that we're going to pick up some additional billing units. We picked up more than expected, which is good. It's fairly typical in a community like Westborough where you have a lot of non-residential, large impervious area properties like office parks and commercial businesses, where you're going to end up picking up more billing units with those. So we expected that the revenue would increase to help make up that delta for the revenue impacts that we didn't factor in. So we didn't want to inflate the budget too much in the beginning. Now things are actually landing in a nice spot because we can account for those revenue impacts. And we originally said, well, we'd like to keep the rate steady for 3 years. Well, we think we can keep it steady for 5 years. So it would be the same rate, those rates that were presented, for 5 years. And this graph here is just showing, in the blue lines, it's showing the revenue requirement, meaning with all those assumptions, this is what would be needed for revenue each year. And this is compounding for those reserve amounts, so that 8%, that 5% capital and O&M reserve means we're assuming that's going to get spent and you'd have to make that up every year, when in reality we may not spend that. So there's an opportunity to still level fund this even though the graph doesn't represent that. So what we did is we drew a line and said, this is our program revenue target. We're going to adjust annually to make sure we continue to hit that target. But we do have expected growth in revenue due to billing units that will probably increase over time. Development still occurs at some slow rate, and redevelopments. We assume 0.5% for billing unit growth. And so what we're projecting is that we can hit a level or steady billing rate for the next 5 years. So we'll have to make some adjustments to that revenue equation. So we might tweak the assumptions a little bit, but some of the things that we just can't predict right now are things like credits. We've made an assumption of 5% for credits, which is generous for most communities. We typically see 2 or 3% revenue impact, and that's not always annual. So that's, at some point, people apply for credits, they get them or they don't. And they don't, that revenue takes a hit that particular year, and then you have consistent revenue thereafter. So it's not like you're adding all that new credit each consecutive year. It doesn't compound. So 5% is reasonable to assume, given the fact that you guys have a lot of significant non-residential properties that probably qualify for credits. And based upon the credit policies that we've discussed and reviewed, we think 5% is probably a good number. But in reality, we'll have to see how many actually apply, how many qualify, and then how much of that money is given back in credits. And so this is always something that has to be adjusted, every 6 to 12 months to look at the revenue projections. So, but the additional impervious area calculations and billing units meant we have a healthier budget to work with to meet those requirements. The alternative, as we discussed earlier this year, was we would have to cut something in the budget to account for that. So it's in a much healthier position. So I wanted to just talk about the credit portion of this, of the stormwater utility. So credits are referenced in the bylaw, that they'll be eligible, the properties will be eligible. This is the credit policy that was developed with staff. It's very similar to what a lot of other communities do in Massachusetts and across the country. Some of the dashboard communities for Westborough offer up to 50%. What we're suggesting is kind of a two-tier approach here, where we're suggesting that you could get a 20% credit on your stormwater bill for properties that qualify if it's something that meets a historic design criteria. So if you have something that manages stormwater on site, that mitigates peak flow or water quality, that was engineered to manage stormwater, that's a private investment, and it's maintained, and it's inspected and acceptable to the town, you apply for an application and the town will give up to a 20% credit. So it's a more simplified process. It recognizes that even though you don't meet today's standards for stormwater management, you meet a historic standard, there's still value to that, and you don't have to go back and re-engineer the system necessarily. Now, if you have a newer system that met the 2008 guidelines for Mass DEP, which are still in effect today, then the town would offer 40% credit. So in other words, you met a higher standard, we're going to give you more credit because it was probably a greater investment, and it has more benefit to the community in terms of mitigating flooding and water quality issues. So we're recognizing that, but the bar is higher, so you have to have demonstrated calculations that meet those current standards. At the same time, a property that maybe wasn't built to those standards, you could retrofit it to meet those, but you have to demonstrate that. So it's a more onerous application process. It would typically have to be submitted by an engineer with engineering calculations. So this is one way that we've seen communities go. So it's kind of like a stepwise approach. There's some benefit to be recognized for existing systems, even if they don't meet today's standards. And it's not an all or nothing approach. A lot of communities say either you meet it or you don't. So you get 50% if you meet it, but you get 0 if you don't. And so a lot of systems don't meet the full criteria. They might be close. So this is just another way that I think it's a little more generous in some ways, but you're not offering as much for your total credit. Some communities cap it at 20%. Very few go more than 50%. So we think that this is a reasonable policy and something that, certainly properties that qualify, and this could be, typically the larger properties that have more impervious area. From a business standpoint, it may make more sense for them to apply because it's a bigger benefit, 40% of a large bill. Small properties, single-family properties, typically, this may not be worth the investment to submit the application to get, $100 off your bill per year. But that's up to people that want to do that. Obviously, there are some single-family properties that have had to implement stormwater requirements that we want them to have the ability to access a credit to. But it's not typical that residential properties will qualify. So we just wanted to provide one example. We have spent some time in the last several months working with 55 plus communities, similar to condos, and so that they could understand what their fees would be, because we do look at those properties a little bit differently than a single family. We count the common areas that are impervious, which includes the roads, because the roads are private in many of these. So we look at the total impervious area, calculate that based on the billing rate structure, and then we look at the number of units and we kind of equate that to, well, what would a typical unit within this development be charged? And it's somewhere in the range of a tier 2 to tier 3 single family following that rate structure. Now, these properties are more likely to get a credit, so we just looked at a scenario and said, okay, well, if you get 20% or 40% credit, here's the resulting fee. So the adjusted fee from $183 per year per residential unit would go down to somewhere around $145 or $109 if they qualify for the 40%. So there is definitely a benefit, and typically these properties could submit one application for all the residential units, and then it would apply to everybody. So that's just an example. This was, 55 plus communities, HOAs, and other properties with common areas. Because they're calculated differently, they still feel like they're single family, but we look at them differently for the calculations. There's generally more community interest in how that's handled, which is why we want to provide an example. Just real quick on exemptions, this is something that was brought up by staff in terms of what properties could apply for an exemption from the fee or a discount. In the bylaw as it's written, The second bullet there under stormwater utility bylaw, that's what's in the bylaw now. Essentially, there's no exemption other than those right there. So it's undevelopable land, so it doesn't have any impervious area, or it's a wetland system or something that is not going to receive a stormwater bill. It's a railroad right-of-way, exclusive of facilities that have logistics or transportation associated with them. So the actual tracks and ballast are typically not considered impervious. And then we're not billing ourselves for streets and highways and such. So those are the current exemptions. Excuse me, my understanding is that the select board may entertain additional exemptions. The bylaw does say that additional exemptions could be developed through policy. And we've talked about that a little bit internally with DPW, but I guess that's kind of where we we're anticipating that any draft policies, if entertained, would be discussed with staff, the assessor, probably follow some of the guidelines that exist for tax abatement purposes. We also need to keep in mind that stormwater bills for most single-family properties are pretty small compared to taxes. So we're talking about a bill that's somewhere between $100 and $200 per year versus tax bills. So we have to consider the fact that it's a smaller bill to do the administration and such associated with exemptions, even though they could be one-time things, can be a little burdensome. So that's sort of just touching upon exemptions, and we can talk about that a bit more. And then next steps, we discussed, Chris mentioned January 9th meeting. We anticipate that you guys would take action on the rates and the analysis for the finances. And from there, we would finalize the credit manual, work on any policies, and then one of the things that we really need to do before bills can be sent out later, our second half of the year, is developing the billing master account file. So how we handle all these different properties and making sure they get the right bill based upon the rate structure and the rates that have been set. So we do need that to be set before we develop that final step. And then we are anticipating billing sometime in July. So with that, I'll open it for discussion.
Thank you very much. Someone want to start? I can talk to, this presentation was given to the Finance Committee. Myself, I'm on that committee, chair of the Finance team, thank you, not the committee, the team, right. Chair of the AFC and a lot of the finance director, town manager, and others. They walked through it in great detail for us. And these, if my understanding is correct, these rates haven't changed from what was considered earlier. I think it's just the impervious area has changed, which is how we came to roughly 1.7 million versus the 1.5. One of the reasons coming out of the finance team meeting, we stayed with these rates is because we don't really know how pervasive the credits are going to be. So we're saying it at max it's going to be 1.7, but it could be, there could be credits of 100,000, 200,000. We don't know how many businesses are going to come forward requesting those. So we felt that this maintaining that rate rather than decreasing it slightly made sense. At least that was a thought coming out of that finance team meeting. But I open it up to questions from anyone. Go ahead.
You may have answered there, but so on the prior slides, is that rate that was presented before for the billing unit, is that at this point what you think that rate will be that you're looking for us to set in January, or is that still being refined?
That's what, unless something changes tonight, that you give some guidance that maybe changes things dramatically, that's what we're going to propose.
Perfect. And that factors in everything you talked about and the other revenue that wasn't part of it. So it was actually a very, did a very good job before of putting that in with working things out that what was presented at town meeting, and as an estimate actually looks like it's coming out. So thank you. The second piece, you said that, and I might get this wrong, but that you think we can keep these rates steady for 5 years, but what will be our ask? Will it be a 3-year rate set, or are you going to ask for a 5-year rate set, or?
We haven't really discussed the timeline for the rates. I don't have a specific opinion other than, you know, if we set a rate for 5 years and something changes in that time frame and we need to adjust it, then we're going to come back and ask to adjust it, and then you can decide, you know, yes or no, I suppose.
Okay.
So,
Or is it, I mean, I'm looking at Chris here maybe, but is it that we're setting it for a time period, or do we set this annually?
Well, this is different than any other rates. I mean, we review our water and sewer rates annually based on the budget, so I would expect that minimally there would be a review annually. And then to Chris's point, because you're the rate setting authority on this one, that he would come back and just either acknowledge that they, you know, maybe don't need to change, or request that they change. So I expect it'll be visited annually.
Okay, that's a good answer, yeah. The 5-year a little bit scared me, because exactly, Chris, what you, I mean, especially starting out,
Yeah.
it's great seeing that and the fact that we think that we can keep it, but I think it's still some unknowns here, and as you said, with credits and that stuff, so.
yeah,
Well,
I think just to go off of that, which is a great point, one of the, there are many reasons, but one of the reasons for presenting that information looking longer term is because you know, we didn't want to pitch this as it's only going to be $50 this year, and then next year suddenly it's 75, right? Nobody appreciates that. Nobody wants that. We wanted to be as forward-looking as we could in terms of what the impact is to the people paying it. And so this data is as good as we have it, and I think it's a good, it's good news, right? Because we think, unless something dramatically changes, we could, you know, at least for a few years, maybe it's not 5, maybe it's 4, but we can go pretty good amount of time without having to adjust rates. And so people can, not just residents, but also businesses can make, you know, budgeting plans off of that.
Yeah.
So.
Perfect. Nope, that's great, thank you.
Yeah,
That's
the
all.
other thing, sorry, I would just like to add to that. So, yeah, I mean, things could change. What we've assumed is that capital expenditures would be on a cash flow basis. You know, so we could look at, you know, sometimes communities keep rates steady or longer by borrowing. Or we may say, listen, we have more project needs and we have things that have fallen apart in the next 2 years. The recent events, thankfully not so much in Westborough, the recent rain events in a lot of communities have accelerated their capital need for addressing flooding issues, right? Mm-hmm. So those things can change. Things, you know, we have culverts that haven't been assessed. So there are unknowns in the program in terms of the expenditures. We estimated some reserve, but that's not a lot. I mean, that's not going to be another whole project. That's reserved for maybe something that changes a little bit, or prices come in a little higher, whatever. So there's not a ton of cushion overall. It's still what we think is a healthy budget, but there's also the unknown of the program need, which could change. Or the community could say, listen, we want some of these nuisance problems addressed sooner, and we want to look at water quality issues a bit more, or recharge to the aquifer. And those would be program modifications, but we're saying as the program is set now, based upon what we know we need to do, at least in the short term, that this is adequate revenue for that program. So rates change quite often because the program changes. We'd like to set an expectation that it's going to be steady based on what we now know for expenditures.
Perfect, thank you. That's all I had.
So more of a procedural issue, well, a question about rate setting. So we'll set rates per unit. Is there an expectation that at some point in time is, you know, development happens and the rate, you know, the ratio of different sized properties might alter a bit, that you'd look at where the break point is for tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3?
Typically, no.
Okay.
So the tiers are for residential only. So as development occurs, if there's changes to property size for impervious area, if it's more than plus or minus, you know, maybe 1,000 square feet, you might look at it to adjust the billing units. But it's only going to make a difference if it's more than 2,000 square feet.
Okay.
So you could have some redevelopment at a particular site that they expand their parking lot. Well, so you're going to send them a larger bill. It doesn't mean you revamp the rate structure. The tiered rate structure for residential is based upon the residential rate base, essentially, those properties only. So unless we have a dramatic change in development or redevelopment for existing residential property, you'd have to have a lot of new residential property to start to shift that distribution of property or size of impervious area by residential property. We typically don't see it in a community like Westborough where, your build out is not extensive in terms of that opportunity. And the properties that would increase probably the most number of single-family dwelling units would be high-density condos maybe, and those are treated separately anyway than the tiers. So it's unlikely. There's always adjustments though. So there's adjustments that may occur, and people can come in and say, "Listen, I don't think my calculation's accurate," and you'll get that in the beginning.
Yeah, and that was gonna be my next question, right?
Yeah.
So someone, comes in and they get the bill and they're looking at the impervious area and they're saying, wait a minute, they counted my deck as a patio, right? It's a wood deck, the water flows through, there's gravel underneath, it's impervious. They've counted in, it's pervious, they've counted as impervious area. Those adjustments don't matter small adjustments don't matter unless the home is near the boundary between a tier 1, tier 2, or
Right.
between a tier 2, tier 3. Similarly, if someone said, I'm redoing my asphalt driveway, and instead of asphalt, I'm gonna put in, a surface that allows the water to drain through rather than just drain off, then someone could come in and say, this is gonna move me down a tier. But
Yep.
for most homes, if there's a difference, unless the difference is enough to push them over into a higher tier or down into a lower tier, it's not material what
Right.
the computer estimate is.
Right, which is why we did that refinement, so it's less likely that you're gonna be off at that break point. So people could still come in because they don't understand it.
Yep.
They could see that maybe you misinterpreted, because we don't visit the sites to look at them. So a patio or deck could look the same as something that we by definition call impervious. And so the town will make an adjustment. Typically, you have kind of a written policy that you follow. You typically want to put that on your website and say, if you think that this is inaccurate, here's the process. But in other words, don't come asking us to adjust it by 20 square feet. It's not going to make a difference. In fact, be careful what you ask for, because sometimes you come in and the town will review it and find out that there's something that you built recently that they're going to calculate. Now you're getting a larger bill, which has happened to some of the clients that I've worked with. The people come in to complain about their bill to get a lower bill, and they end up getting a higher bill. So, but there's a process to do that can be spelled out in guidelines, and this, part of the.
And some educational materials.
Correct. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Is typically as we're leading up to sending out bills, there's an education outreach program, information available, FAQs, that sort of thing, that's similar to what we developed in the past, so that people understand that there is a process they can inquire, and adjustments that are warranted will be made.
Rich mentioned it earlier, but just to reiterate on the refinement of data. So the first round we did a year or so ago was AI driven. This refinement was done by an individual sitting at a computer and looking at things and moving dots around to specifically make sure the lines were where they're supposed to be. So, someone whose profession is to read satellite imagery and all those things and do this manipulation, did this. It's not just, we hoped the computer got it right. It was an individual that did it, so.
With that said, it's never 100%. There's a human error component, or there's also just the data anomaly, because the imagery that we use isn't as of last month necessarily. So something could be different, but it's a pretty small percentage. And that's why you guys paid us to do that, to refine it so that it's as accurate as possible.
Well, we have other questions coming down the line. Can you pull up there's the third or fourth slide with all the rates? That one. Thank you. I just wanted to look at it thanks.
I'm good. Yeah, thanks.
Sure, I'll go. So actually, I want to look at a slide before that, the bell curve slide of all the different, sorry.
Kidding.
We can come back to it. I guess, and maybe you explain this, but please just educate me again if you did. Why wouldn't we, 3 tiers here, and I look at Shrewsbury model, they have 11 different tiers. Granted, their tiers go up to a much larger square footage capacity. But why wouldn't we charge as is? So, and the reason why I ask that is I look at somebody who's in tier 2 and they're 3,500 square feet, but they're also paying the same rate as somebody who's got 5,500 square feet. So that's an essentially, well, I don't know, I'm not gonna do the math here, but significant percentage difference between those two, but they're paying the same rate. Is that a correct understanding?
Sorry, if you say they're 3,500 square
30
feet?
If I look at, excuse me, 4,000 square foot in
Yep.
tier 2 is the same as 5,500 square foot in tier 2.
Right.
So they pay the same rate.
Yeah, so when we went through this, the rate structure originally, and that was what was adopted as part of the bylaw, you know, there's, I like to say there's a balance between equity and simplicity. So to make it completely equitable in somebody's head, you could say you calculate down to the square foot, but in reality, it doesn't mean much difference in a property that has, you know, 5,001 square feet versus 5,000 square feet. They're pretty much the same in terms of
I
data
get
accuracy.
that. Yeah.
So the square foot doesn't make sense, right? But that would be the most equitable in theory. Now, it also becomes more challenging and more data intensive to manage that information if you start to slice the onion too thin. And most people look at residential, say, some residential, they say they all look the same, unless they're really, really large, and we'll treat them differently. So if you look at the rate structure for a lot of stormwater utilities across the country and in New England, a lot of them just say if you're single family, you get 1 billing unit. So there's no tiering at all. Now, communities have gone to tiering in recent years because we have better data, so we can do that.
Yeah.
But at some point, it does become costly to the community to administer the program, make all these slight adjustments. So if you say, I'm going to slice it down to every 100 square feet or 200 square feet, then you need to be more accurate and calculate every individual property and manage every change associated with that for relatively small dollars. So when you take your billing unit and make it really small by slicing these properties, you know, in many different categories, it means you have very subtle differences between properties now. Okay. And then people start to get into the argument of, well, now my property drains this way, it doesn't drain to the street. And because there's subtleties in how properties, you know, in reality work and flow. And the stormwater utility approach is not meant to be perfect. It's a way of approximating the use of the public system. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't always work down to the square foot. So that's why we try to put it into reasonable categories. And when we work through this with Westborough and other communities that I've worked with, I try to steer towards simple. But you look at the distribution and say, well, there's properties that only have 2,000 square feet. Then there's some that have 15,000. Mm-hmm. We definitely have to recognize the difference of those because it doesn't seem fair. But then when you start to narrow that gap, at some point, the differences are subtle. And it's easier to say small, medium, large, really large. And so it kind of keeps it simple. That's sort of the...
One thing I'd add to that too is using impermeable area is we need a tool to charge something. Your water is metered, so we can easily do that. We don't have a way to meter this, so we use impermeable area. But the fee you're paying is not for your property. You're paying a fee for the roads you drive over that have culverts and catch basins and everything else. So the person who's on the very left of this chart is paying an amount that's less than the person in tier 3, but they're using the same services that the town's providing through all this infrastructure across the town. So you could make the counter argument that, you know, they're not paying as much as somebody else. So it, like Rich said, there's probably 1,000 ways we could do it, and this seemed during the process we went through to develop this the one that fit us
Sure.
the best.
No, I appreciate that. It definitely helped better educate me. My next question is, do you have a bell curve on commercial industrial properties as well, or those other properties? I'm just curious what the spread is of those properties.
0 to about 2 million.
Okay. So it's a pretty big.
It's
pretty
huge.
Big, it's huge, yeah.
So Westborough actually has, I think I had it in a previous presentation, or at least internal with staff. There's at least 20 properties that have more than 1 million square feet.
Okay.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
So it varies widely, which is why we don't put it in tiers. We say, well, take that total number, divide it by 2,000, which is half of the single-family residential average. And it's to say that there are certain size bigger than single-family.
Sure. I guess flip back to Shelby, wanted to keep up there. My next question was your approach on credit. I appreciate that those two approaches, the 20% to 40%, very helpful. It's good to be creative. I noticed a couple of towns that were referenced in our packet actually have the 50%. In particular, I think it was Westford and Reading had the 50%, and I think maybe even Shrewsbury as well. So understanding that some of these systems are expensive to put in for the taxpayer to install and maintain these systems on their property. I'm just curious as to, hey, I'm a property owner, I put in, let's say, the latest and greatest thing, I'm only gonna get a 40%. What is the rationale at the 40% versus going up to a?
Yeah, so when we looked at this a while ago, we did look at the program costs that are fixed. So essentially, we're trying to, like Chris mentioned, we're trying to find a way to pay for the public infrastructure and the maintenance of that, which everybody benefits from. You know, whether or not you access that as part of your business or your daily routine, we still have to find a way to maintain that. And so your individual property's impact on the system, if you have excessive impervious area or you have some amount of impervious area, there's flow that comes from your property that goes to the public system. But there's also a lot of things that don't always directly relate to your property. And we're looking at a way to capture, a way to pay for these other fixed costs that you just can't avoid. So while you can abate all your stormwater on your property, there's still fixed costs that the town has to pay for the public system. And some of those include compliance, administration, you know, replacement of culverts that we need to access the roads. So you can abate all of your stormwater on your property. It's just, there's still fixed program costs that need to be paid for. Okay. So you're never decreasing the town's burden 100%.
Understood. One of the towns that also, I think it was Westford, has a stormwater viewer application which they allow. I think it's a GIS tool. Is that something that we would also have for residents to go in and check, to the previous question about, hey, my property, I decreased the size of my driveway. How do I get my bill reduced? Is that something that they would have access to look at, or is that something they would come into the town and ask for somebody to come out on property and verify that?
Yeah, so we talked about that. I mean, it's something we can probably accommodate with the project. So we do have some budget within our contract to do public education outreach to support that.
Are you referring to, say, going to a website and being able to kind of fool around with something and calculate your own?
Yep.
Yeah, that certainly exists. It's not something we currently have identified as part of our scope of the project. So it is doable. It's not something we've figured out how to do yet, and what that cost is, because there's obviously a cost to that.
But it sounds like there's an accommodation. Hey, I tore down a shed on my property that was 1,000 square feet of roof or something like that, you know, or a barn in that case. I want to come into the town hall and I want to see if I can get my stormwater bill reduced by that amount or drop into a different tier at least. Is that something?
Yeah, in terms of if somebody has a question about whether they have, based on something they did with their property and they're shifting in tiers, they would just essentially contact us and we would have that discussion about what they did and then kind of work with them individually as to what the impact might be to their rate.
Okay, thank you.
So great presentation. Thank you, as always, for being thorough and answering lots of questions as you go, and to the board for their questions. Can you go to the credit slide, please? So just from a process perspective, if someone were to apply for one of these credits and they were demonstrating their stormwater design standard, that, am I correct in assuming that verification is kind of a one-time, right? Because here's my system, here's the documentation, here's how it was permitted, right? I've done that one time. And I'm doing that, let's say, in year one. And then let's say in year two, I'm going to come back. Am I having to go through that exact same process again? Or is it sort of, I'm going to say, a little bit abbreviated because I've kind of, provided some of that documentation? I'm a little bit in the weeds here, but I'm just trying to understand as well administratively how that will be managed.
Yeah, so there are some kind of considerations for the process and administration of credits. typically, the application is detailed. It's a one-time application, unless you change something at the site. And then if, so we can write things into the requirements in that process for that application that you need to submit this documentation. The biggest thing that would need to be renewed on an annual basis is demonstrating that you're maintaining it properly.
Yep.
And that it's still functioning as performed, or as designed, rather.
Yep.
That's the biggest piece. So even with that application, you need to show that you've been doing the historic maintenance and that it's meeting the current conditions. The current conditions are meeting what was designed originally, because the standards go back to 2008 for that 40% credit. So you could have a system that's 14 years old or 15 years old, and if it hasn't been maintained, it's in a condition that won't qualify. They would have to improve that and then demonstrate each year that they're maintaining it. Towns can require them to resubmit an application. We typically don't recommend doing that. It is an additional administrative burden to review those each year, because it's quite a bit of information. The maintenance records are the most important. So I think for now, Chris, I don't think we're requiring our annual submittal. Sometimes communities will say, well, resubmit every 5 years to make sure, and have an engineer assess it to make sure it's still working properly. So that's something you could consider at some point.
Okay.
So there may not be a requirement every year to submit a new application, but there will be some requirement on an annual basis that there's some interaction between the town and the property owner to make sure that what they're doing is being done. Or
Right.
it's continuing, what they said they were doing is continuing to be done.
Well, and I'm not as familiar with that on the residential side, but certainly on the commercial side, I know that there is a process, right? So commercial properties have to submit documentation to DPW saying, I've got the system, this is how I'm maintaining it. Our business is going to have to resubmit that same information that they've already submitted as part of this application process?
No, if they're submitting it in accordance with the program you described, then
Yep.
that would be, I'm
I
not,
mean,
I can't
you'll-
say this with 100%
yeah.
certainty, but I assume that would, we wouldn't make people submit the same thing twice. So
Right.
we would try
Well,
and
something to
align
think
them.
about. I mean,
Yeah.
I know we're kind of deep into the weeds here, or the water, whatever. But I think we should just, we don't want to make the process onerous, right? And on either end, right? So if we have that documentation, if it, and someone is maintaining it, I would hope that we make that pretty easy. But okay, thank
Yeah,
you.
well, and sometimes, so some of those properties are required. They may not all be doing it. And
Sure.
we quite often find that the older properties that were authorized permits, maybe they're just not in the database.
Yep.
And they're not submitting it, property management changes.
Well, now they will.
They're not aware of it. So this program actually does help kind of,
Yeah.
pull those skeletons out.
Sure.
And make sure that things are getting done.
I got it. Okay. Well, I think, Chris, you made a good point, which I have to keep reminding myself of, is that this is not just about like your personal impervious surface or impervious area. It's about the whole town and the use of those. And I think that that's an important message that I know I have to continue to refresh my memory on. So I think as we go forward with education, that's really important, because people are going to go, but wait, I only, or I
Yeah.
did this on my property. So
Well, because people start to look at it very personally, obviously.
sure.
Is that you're measuring my property, and
Yep.
it's like, yes, we are, but it's
And-
part of a broader program. It's a
Right.
way to distribute the
Yep.
cost and the burden.
Yep.
And one of the analogies we did use in some of the public education sessions are, when we look at other utilities, you don't pay exactly based upon the cost of service to your home. So there's not always a one-to-one, even though you're metering it. You take the program cost and you distribute across the rate base. And so those costs, even if you're further from the water tank or the well, you don't pay more. You
Right.
pay the same as the person that's a mile away or 2 miles away.
Right.
Because if we did it based upon the actual cost of service to each individual property, it'd be disproportionate.
Yeah.
So as a public system, we share that cost, and we kind of defray it across the rate base. So that's why when we look at being exact on everything, there's some cause and effect relationship between impervious area and the need to manage stormwater as a public system, but it's not always one for one.
This is great. No other questions. Thank you for a great presentation.
Thank you. A couple more questions. So will residents be able to see what their estimated impervious area is?
Through the GIS viewer, so we
So-
will have a database.
Yeah, so we're saying
Yeah.
you're in tier 2, And that's 4,000 to 6,000, right? So
Yep.
if I'm at 5,900, I'm not coming in to complain about my, whether you got it right. If I'm at 4,100, maybe I'm gonna stop by. Like,
Yeah.
would residents have that sort of degree of?
We haven't specifically talked like what the bills are gonna actually look like. I don't know. I suspect there would be some representation on your bill that says, you know, how much impervious area you have, and then
Okay.
potentially there's some way we would, similar to the storm viewer, we would have some ability to go into, look up your property and, you know, pops up on the screen and says kind of what the IA is. But the mechanics of that we have not really discussed or figured out, but that's potentially available.
Yeah, so right now, for every property that will get a bill, we have the property, parcel ID, address, the impervious area, and then what tier they fall within. So we do have those values for each property. So what Chris is saying is sometimes communities choose to just put on the bill your tier 1. You know, and that means obviously you're within this range. You can put the exact number on there if you like, but you don't always have to. But at least that data is available. If somebody were to inquire, Chris's team could look it up and say, here's your property, here's the calculation. They could also pull up the GIS data layer to check it. You could even say, grab a screenshot and send it to them if they want. Making it into a web viewer and the investment to do that, we'll have to see whether that's the best approach. A lot of people want to know what their bill is, and some don't seem to care too much. Others will dig into it. So it's usually, you know, you're developing those tools for a small percentage of the population that cares a lot. But it is helpful in some cases. So, but the data is always available. Just how we present it is something that we need to think about.
Yeah, more just curious. I'm certain at some point it'll come up.
Yeah.
A separate question. So we talk about the 2008 guidelines as being kind of the latest standard, and who knows if there'll be another standard that comes out in the future that we should consider as well. If you're in a community or in a commercial property that was built prior to 2008, there was probably no reason for you to upgrade to the 2008 standard. You probably grandfathered to the prior standard, I would imagine. I guess how stringent is the 2008 standard? I imagine some properties in town will be looking to see if the math works out that they should bother trying to upgrade to the 2008 standard. I don't know what sort of hurdle that would be.
So some of the changes between pre-2008 to the 2008 standards are largely related to infiltration criteria. So how much you need to infiltrate at the site to mimic the prior development recharge criteria, and water quality. So most systems that are older really just manage flow. We want to make sure we manage the volume and the peak flow so it doesn't run off the site and cause problems. That was sort of some of the older design criteria. Water quality and infiltration is really what has changed the most in those standards. And so sometimes a basin, a stormwater basin that holds the water for flow attenuation could be retrofitted to meet water quality standards. We do that quite often, actually, for municipalities to meet other water quality goals for the community. But there's an investment, obviously. So they need to look at that investment, have an engineer look at it to see what is it going to take to get that additional credit, and is it worthwhile?
Got it. Yeah, I think about the example you put out, Walker Meadows, right? And so at 20%, that's $40 roughly per unit, 100 units. So that's $4,000 to the community. If it costs them $100,000 to upgrade their system, you know, I imagine probably not worth it. So
I think typically, and he does this more than I do, but I just assume that you're not going to necessarily see any sort of upgrade unless you're redeveloping your site for some other purpose, and it just makes sense, or you're dictated because you're redeveloping, and so we say you got to bring it to current standards.
But I think we also see that businesses, if they don't have a short return on investment, 5 or 10 years, they won't bother. Especially if it's a leased property management company may not care. they just pass the cost on. So that's the hard part about credits is we can look at the number of properties and say there's a basin here. Maybe that property gets 20%, maybe it gets 40. Whether they actually apply is the variable we don't know. So yeah, it's hard to predict, but residents may say, well, it's $4,000, it's a $50,000 investment, it's a 12-year return on investment, but I've got a 30-year mortgage, so maybe it's worthwhile to me.
Right.
So
No, and I think it makes sense too, that if you have something and you're maintaining it, then you should be incentivized to continue maintaining it in some way. So I think that makes a lot of sense, and I appreciate and agree with your recommendations. So thank you both very much for coming here this evening and changing your
all right,
schedule.
thanks for the time.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you.
Happy holidays.
Yeah, to you as well.
Likewise. Okay. Up to item number 4 on the schedule, the library repair project presentation and request to endorse Americans with Disabilities Act compliance statement.
So we are early on this. Are they okay with going?
Yeah, oh yeah, is everybody here? Or
Yeah,
enough
we're
of-
here.
Or enough of you? Okay. Yeah, we're usually not early, I think.
I know, right? It was like, I had to
Keep
check
it
my, I
going.
was like,
I was looking
is
at
this
it
thing
before.
working?
For a half hour ahead.
Knock on wood.
Yeah. Come on now. What's it? I needed something. Oh, look at that. I'd be like the lady in the show. I know, it was like,
She's got a
oh,
candy
thank you, I'm all set. I'm freshened. I'm calling attention to my,
And let me say before you begin, I'm a member of the Library Building Committee. Thank you for coming tonight. Some recent decisions have been made on the project, and so I asked of the committee that they come and provide an update to us. So, and they agreed. Thank you very much.
Sure. Happy to, anytime. And thank you for having us. I'm Maureen Amiot, Library Director, 6 Arch Street.
And I'm Mary Johnston, Chair of the Library Board of Trustees, 5 Sandra Pond Road.
Before we start our update presentation, I wanted to give you and anyone who might be watching who's not familiar with the project a quick refresher on our project timeline. So at the March 2023 annual town meeting, funds were approved for a study to determine the extent of the repair needs and to create a schematic or a conceptual design with ballpark cost estimate. We plan to do public information sessions in the early part of the new year to share this information and any new information that we get before that point, and to bring an article to the Springtown meeting to fund the next phase of the project. If that's approved, a detailed design, a detailed cost estimate, and bid documents would be prepared over the next year. The project would then come to town meeting in the spring of 2025 for approval. And if it's approved at that time, construction would begin shortly afterward and would be completed in early 2026. So my point being, we're still early in the process.
We designed this project as a 3-phase project. The study work in Phase 1 has been completed. The design team did a full assessment of the buildings, the 1908 and the 1980 buildings, and brought in a team of engineers to assess things like the site, electrical, plumbing, HVAC systems, the roof, windows, and exteriors, and code compliance. The schematic design is being completed, and the documentation has been sent to the cost estimators. The designers and project manager will be meeting the first week of January to reconcile their separate cost estimates and come up with a final bid, but preliminary cost estimate. It is important to note that at this point in the project, the design is a concept, and the numbers that come out in January will be preliminary. They will give us an idea of what the project will cost, but they are not the final numbers by any means.
At this spring's annual town meeting, we'll be presenting the schematic design and preliminary cost estimates and asking for funds for the next phase of the project. If that's approved, the funding will allow us to refine the design, make final decisions on some items like heating systems, temporary space, and changes to the way we use the space inside the building. A detailed final cost estimate will be prepared, and the designers will create bid documents that we will be able to use to get bids for the construction. That work will take about a year.
We would be back at the 2025 annual town meeting with our detailed design and final cost estimate to ask for the funds to implement the construction.
And I know you're all familiar with all of this timeline. I just really wanted to make sure that the public understands what they're going to be seeing. Just to recap the work that's been done so far, it started in July, and the architects from Lamoureux Pagano created an amazing 360-degree scan of the interior and exterior of the building using a system called Matterport. It's viewable at this link with the password that's on the screen, and that's available for anyone who wants to look at it. You can fly through the building, you can fly around the building, you can zoom in close up, you can take measurements of different things if you want to. It's really an amazing tool and really gives you an idea of the existing conditions of the building. I will be sharing these slides, and they'll be posted on the library website too. So if any of you or anyone watching wants to just click through and see that, they'll be able to do that too. In August and September, this is the list of consultants who were on site doing assessments, documenting existing conditions, and then gathering information that helped to inform the schematic design.
In October and November, the Library Building Committee worked on a statement regarding ADA compliance, which we will discuss separately in a few minutes. The design team presented 4 scope options, ranging from the absolute basic repair up to modifications with extensive renovation. The committee discussed and deliberated all 4 scopes and settled on one, the most basic one, but with a few modifications to add items that were deemed essential but were missing from that basic repair scenario. We also had a long discussion with the HVAC consultant regarding the benefits, pros and cons, and issues around full electrification and heat pumps. Ultimately, it was decided to keep the existing gas-fired boiler, but to add backup heat pumps as a placeholder for budgeting purposes. Further discussions and decisions about the issue will take place if we move into the next phase of design.
Earlier this month, the designers moved into schematic design now that they understood the scope of the work that was needed. They carefully considered all of the input from the Library Building Committee, the engineers and experts, and are designing the most cost-efficient project that will meet the needs outlined in the scope of work. And I want to pause and repeat something that Bob Petroselli said at town meeting, and he has said many times that the most cost-effective project may not be the cheapest. And so it's important to note that. The schematic design documents were just given to the cost estimators last week, and they're working separately with the architect and the project manager. As I mentioned before, Lamoureux Pagano, our architect, and Vertex, our OPM, will be meeting in early January to reconcile their separate cost estimates and come up with one. And they'll present the design drawings and the cost estimates to the Library Building Committee at our meeting in mid-January. We plan to be back again to present to you, to the Advisory Finance Committee, and to the public after that point.
Thank you for giving us the time to update you on this presentation tonight, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much.
I have a question about the timeline. So
Yeah.
for the March 2025 town meeting, will you have gone to bid and have a winning bid that's contingent on approval? Or would you just have the detailed cost estimates that would then have to go out to bid? And the reason I ask is we've seen in a number of school projects where they come to town meeting, they've got the detailed estimates, but then they go out to bid and there's a market condition or something that is a variable, and then 6 months or 12 months later, we're looking at additional funds that weren't anticipated.
Our plan is to put them out to bid so that we can bring a a number to town
Great.
meeting.
Thank you.
Good.
I think that's,
Yeah, good
I
answer.
think that helps
Yeah.
the voters
Yeah.
and gives us definitely a level of certainty and confidence
Yeah.
about the project.
And
so.
we don't want to be back at town meeting again asking for additional money for this project
No.
at all,
please.
ever again.
That's it.
Mary, so great presentation. Thank you very much. You'd mentioned you were going to talk about the ADA component.
Sure. Do you want to do that now?
Yeah,
Sure.
I mean, I think it all sort of ties into
Yep.
the work that is being done here.
So through our work as the building committee, we've had a lot of public input and questions about the strategy that the library building committee is taking, and whether or not we were going to go stagger out our repairs in order to avoid triggering any ADA compliance. And it kept coming up over and over again. And so the library building committee really decided to sit down and address this topic. And we put together a statement of our strategy, and our goal is to not avoid triggering ADA compliance. We feel that it's a public building, it services everyone in town, and that there's a lot of things that need to be done to the project, and we should do them in one cohesive project that in the end result can service everybody in our town.
One other thing I would like to add that you've also heard me say over and over and over is we're a public library, and public is our middle name. And as such, we serve the entire public, and that includes people who have all sorts of disabilities, and they need to be able to access our building and our services. And to expect a municipal committee to intentionally avoid the law to make a project cheaper is offensive, and it is not in the spirit of what libraries do. It's not in the spirit of what we do as municipal employees serving the public. We serve the whole public, and our building clearly needs ADA upgrades. Any of the work that we do in any of the scope scenarios that was presented requires us to come into compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act, and we fully intend to do that. So the statement that you received in your packet lays that out clearly, explains all of the laws that we're required to follow as a municipality when it comes to building projects. And I think it also underscores what the mission and vision of the library are, and that this project will meet our mission and vision by welcoming our patrons with disabilities in a way that they'll be able to fully access the building like they should be able to.
The library building committee fully, strongly, unanimously supported it. They voted on it, then they presented it to the trustees to ask for our endorsement, which we also unanimously gave because we feel strongly that that's the direction and the spirit of the library of the town of Westborough.
And
So-
I presume this statement is or will be on part of the project website?
It is, it's
It's already
posted
there.
now, yes.
So, thank you. I didn't want to cut you off. You
No,
don't-
Sean,
oh.
yep.
So, thank you. Maureen, you captured my thoughts exactly. First of all, I have mixed feelings as to why you had to do this work, but I also think it's an important investment to do the work because this has come up many, many times. I too would have used the word offensive. I was like, oh, that's my word. I can't imagine doing a municipal project without taking into account the ADA compliance and equity across the community. Certainly understanding that if there is a feasible way to do something to break it down, but this is not that kind of project. I mean, the fact that we're still discussing it honestly is pretty frustrating. But again, I'm very thankful for the statement. So thank you for bringing that forward. Thank you for explaining it here to the board and to the public. And I don't have any questions about this. I want to echo thanks for Alan's question about the bid documents. I think it's great if when you're coming to ATM 25, that it's like, here's the number. So
If I can also just add on to that it is a strategy, for sure. It's a strategy that was proposed by a lot of different, I wouldn't say a lot, but some people in town. And so as a building committee, it was, I think, our responsibility to give due diligence to examine that. And so I'm glad that we did. It was extra work that I too didn't think, like, do we really need to do this? But I feel good that we did do it
Right.
because it is a strategy,
Right.
but it's just not one that we feel fits the best needs.
Yeah. Well, and I think it also clearly speaks to how you're doing this work or how you intend to approach it and why. So thank you.
I'll just add, I'm very appreciative of the work that you all did on this. It's a significant amount of work that the team did to pull this together, and the data that you pulled and documenting the ADA requirements. Offensive is a great word. I would also go so far as to say ludicrous. I've heard this discussion going on in town in regards to splitting this up and not meeting ADA compliant. I just find it completely ridiculous that we wouldn't provide the capability for important, valuable members of our community who happen to be disabled to be able to access a public building in its entirety. It's just crazy in this day and age that we wouldn't do that. So I really appreciate the work on this. I'm fully supportive of the letter that you all have written, and I wish you all the luck as you continue through the process.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to echo thanks to the building committee. It's a lot of work having participated on a school building committee. So thank you. Please extend certainly our thanks for the work being done. And you're welcome back anytime for updates.
Thank you.
And no, thank you both for coming. I think just a couple other questions yet. A tremendous job on the statement. I know that you both worked on it. Bob, Ed, owner's project manager. I think helping us outline exactly not only why we're not comfortable doing it, but why it's also just illegal. I mean, it's breaking the law, right? So we're not considering it, and a tremendous job. One of the things for this evening mentioned, there was originally, I think, 4 scenarios that were discussed. We basically chose the first scenario with a couple additional considerations for systems that are kind of nearing end of life, and we want to make sure that they are, and I think that's where Bob's decision about being cost effective, right? Are we not paying up front for a system that in 5 years we're going to wish we'd done something about? So there's a lot of analysis going on there, but I wanted to thank the Library Building Committee, my fellow members who work a lot harder than I do on it. Thank you very much for coming tonight, and look forward to having you back
Sure.
early next year to talk about the warrant article.
Sean, can I actually, your comment made me think about, I'm not sure, I mean, for folks that are following this project, they're probably well aware of the different scenarios, the 4 that you've tested out. Oh, go ahead, Sean.
No, go ahead. I'm just reminding myself of something.
Okay. Could you kind of generally bucket the scenario that the decision you've landed on, because that wasn't here?
Sure.
And at a very high level, how it's different from the 3 that you said that's not our approach?
Sure. So we went with scope design 1A, if you will. That is very basic repairs. Everything that is essential, that is not working, not up to compliance, is considered in that bucket. And then we looked at, so that's the roof, the electrical, and the windows.
Windows, yeah.
Yep.
But just some windows.
Some of the windows, right. And so that's piece, in that one is, we don't need to replace them all, so strategically doing the ones that we do need to do. And then we looked at those systems that are near end of life, that would be by the end of the project, that when the construction catches up to the end of the project, it makes sense to put them in
Okay.
now, in terms HVAC.
And that's where you mentioned the heat pumps as a potential.
Potential. It's an ongoing discussion,
Yeah.
so, yep, we put it in as a placeholder so that we have all that information.
And that there were a few small, they call them programmatic changes, which is the changes to the way we use the space. One of the big program changes that we knew we needed was our teens don't have enough space in the library. So they're currently occupying the 2 front reading rooms, and the new plan would move them to the back of the main floor, but along the left-hand side. So if you're familiar with the library, where the current fiction collection is, would become an enclosed teen area to provide appropriate space, some noise control, and move teens away from the front door. And then the front reading rooms would become quiet space and comfortable reading. We would also be adding restrooms. That's something that we've heard about for years, literally. Adding additional restrooms on the main floor, fixing up the restrooms in the basement, and doing some renovation to the current meeting room. We can't add windows because most of that room is below grade, but we can improve lighting and improve the technology in that space. And then one kind of different little bit of programming change in the children's room is to enclose the children's program space. So instead of our very beautiful 70s era accordion door, we'll have something that looks a little more up to date that will control noise and space a little bit better. So it's just some small program changes, but things that will hopefully really make an impact.
That might be a hot vintage resale item, so
Could be.
you never
Could
know.
be.
The only other, by doing those, allows us to create a historical document archive space that would be climate controlled and much needed for all of the historical documents we have at the library for the town.
Great, thank you very much.
Sure.
Oh, thank you. And I think one of the other things, at one point, there was consideration of a couple of small rooms, and now we're sort of switching that out for pods, which, so very cost-effective and a nice addition. The thing I almost forgot was, I will make the motion to move to endorse the Library Building Committee statement on ADA compliance.
Second.
All those in favor? 5-0.
You bet. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The local initiative, oh wait, are we skipping over 5?
Nope, I didn't see any paperwork on that.
We're skipping over 5, right?
No. Because we need a new certificate.
Yeah, so we're skipping over that.
There's,
Well, the only issue with the certificate is that they've identified the chief executive officer improperly. So as long as everything else is in order, you could move forward with it.
is it in the packet?
Is it not in the? Oh, never mind.
It's not in the packet.
Never mind.
Okay.
Okay. Moving over item number 5 to item number 6, the approval of the town manager contract. All right. Thank you. So our town manager, Christy Williams. His current employment contract with the town expires at the conclusion of this fiscal year, June 30th, 2024. I am pleased to announce that the board and town manager have successfully concluded negotiations for a 3-year successor agreement. The following are several of the key provisions of the contract. The contract term is 3 years, effective July 1, 2024 through June 30th, 2027. The base salary for year 1, effective July 1, 2024, shall be $215,000. In years 2 and 3, the town managers shall receive the same percentage salary increase that is received by non-union employees of the town. Additional compensation shall also be paid to the town manager in the form of contributions to a deferred compensation account in the amount of $20,000 per year, and she shall also be entitled to an annual stipend in the amount of $5,000 for maintaining her International City-County Managers Association credentialed manager status. The contract provides for 5 weeks of vacation annually with sick leave, personal leave, and holidays granted in accordance with the town's personnel policies. If the town terminates the contract with the manager for reasons other than serious misconduct and does not provide 9 months' notice of its intent to do so, the manager shall be entitled to severance equal to 9 months of salary. Once the contract is fully executed, it will be posted to the Labor and Employment Agreements page of the town's Human Resources website. Oh, is that the whole thing? And that's it. Okay, that was it. Pardon me. And that is it.
You were not alone.
Yeah, I was going. So, Christy, thank you very much. Look forward to working with you for 3 more years.
No, thank you very much. I think
In some way.
I'm really happy to be here for 3 more years. I can't believe when you said 2027, my daughter, who was not even 2 when I started working here, will be graduating high school. So that's pretty amazing. But it's been a really wonderful career so far in Westborough. So thank you very much.
Thank you. We look forward to 3 years, too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Next item, and there was no further need for us to do anything on that. Item 7, request to approve meeting minutes of November 27th, 2023, November 28th, November 30th, and December 6th. Man, we've been meeting a lot.
You can say that again. I move the approval of all 4 sets of meeting minutes as previously articulated.
Seconded?
Okay, any questions on any of those? Folks are good?
Thank you, Sela.
Yes, yeah. Staying on
And
top
to all a
of
good night. That's what it feels like.
it. All those in favor? 5-0. Next, our town manager's report.
Great. So we have some new personnel, which we want to extend a warm welcome to. We have Sean Nelson, who's joining us in the police department, Ashley Belanger and Shay Labiste in the fire department, Nicholas Weidman and Benjamin McDonald in the Department of Public Works. We are completing our FY25 budget, which will be online by close of business tomorrow. Select Board and Finance Committee members can pick up their hard copy books after 5 for review. Just wanting to note that anyone who's interested, I know it's a really long document, but would strongly encourage folks to read the budget message. There's a whole section in there on budget highlights, which really points out some of the major changes in the budget. And then the budget summit is January 25th, 2024. So that's the all-day meeting that this board has with the Advisory Finance Committee and meets with some of the larger departments. Related to Youth and Family Services, we're continuing to work with Shrewsbury Youth and Family Services to refine next steps. Anticipate bringing more information back to the board in January for discussion. Waste Management, the board did vote to move forward with some of with exploration of some of the programs that the Waste Management Exploratory Committee had articulated. So we're putting together a scope so that we can obtain financial information and hopefully have some discussions in January with this board and the Board of Health. Related to public engagement with the community center, we're working on the RFP for public engagement and design. If the board would like to review this before it's sent out, please let me know so I can put it on the agenda on January 9th. As you just heard from Maureen related to their timeline, I know it's a little bit different, but just wanting to sort of raise that we may find that we need a little more time for public engagement, so I'm not sure if we'll make that annual meeting. I think we all agree that that's a process that's really important, and we want to be thoughtful about it. So I just wanted to bring that up, understanding that we aren't sure yet what that timeline will be. With the Golf Club Building Committee, we're still looking for folks to volunteer to be on the committee. To date, no one from the Building Reuse Committee has volunteered, though we do have Ian serving on that committee. And then related to the Regional Emergency Communication Center, Chief Purcell and I anticipate presenting an update to the board at our next meeting in January. For department head updates, in the recreation department, the Westborough Golf Club is closed for the season. Requests for proposals for the golf course superintendent have been received, and a review process for those has begun with an award for the contract to be announced very soon. The recreation volleyball and ski programs are due to begin just after the new year, so both are full, having 50 participants. In the town clerk's office, they've submitted the annual census street listing to the printer. Residents should expect to see it in their mailboxes shortly after January 1. Residents will be receiving vote by mail postcards from the state in early January. The next election is the presidential primary on March 5th, 2024, followed by the town election on March 12th. Also, residents can license their dogs for 2024 starting online January 1st and in office starting January 2nd. As always, residents are encouraged to call the clerk's office with questions. In the Council on Aging, they oversaw the delivery of 50 Thanksgiving dinners to homebound seniors with the help of several department heads and police officers. In addition, the Senior Center will be delivering close to 300 holiday gifts thanks to the generosity of local businesses and the WSCS, the Westborough Senior Center supporters. Minibus ridership is is way up and is now at the same level as pre-pandemic levels. So the senior center is looking forward to getting the third bus replaced and on the road after the first of the year. You'll see that in your capital plan that you'll get tomorrow. And then the library, Mary Johnson received a citation from State Representative Kate Donahue at the December Library Trustees meeting. The citation was in honor of Mary's recent Massachusetts Library Trustee of the Year award. 14,837 people have Westborough Public Library cards. Just over 13,000 are Westborough residents. The library will be offering English conversation circles starting in January. Information sessions for interested volunteers were held in December, and are excited to bring this program back. It's been on hiatus since 2019. That's it.
Thank you very much. And last but not least, issues and correspondence of the Select Board. Do I have a volunteer to start?
Sure.
All right, thank you.
Nothing to update in terms of board or committee liaison, but just really a quick shout out to DPW, police, fire, everything. I mean, this, as we know, the storm that just recently came through and the power outages we had and some flooding, whatever, but Westborough, I think, fared better than other communities, knock on wood, but I think all of us may receive comments, some to all of us, some individually, about a lot of the work and preventative maintenance that the town's been doing, especially DPW, in tree clearing around poles and just work that we hear about but sometimes goes unnoticed, but just the value in doing that when you see a storm like we just had. Second is just seeing them around town as well, so again, especially DPW, but just clearing up roadways, clearing up down trees, clearing out culverts that may have gotten blocked. I mean, this, as we know, was pretty devastating storm, but just a thanks to, you know, our public safety and our DPW folks and others that I'm probably forgetting here for the work that was done prior, but especially the work done around the storm. Definitely a ton of work for them, and you don't think about it a lot. You think about snowstorms, you don't think about rain and wind events, but really tremendous work, and as a community we should be thankful for that. Thank you.
Well said.
You took my thunder, so
That's what
absolutely,
I went first.
that's what you went first. Absolutely, and I would just say that several members of the community commented to me that it wasn't just the individual response from police, from fire, from DPW, that was evident to them that there was a high level of cooperation, and that things seemed very well coordinated. And so that is definitely really appreciated, and job well done. So kudos. I echo your kudos. Very briefly, at our last meeting, the Affordable Housing Trust, the Select Board had previously delegated its right of purchase for property on Lawton's Way to maintain affordability. I want to provide a quick update. The program that's under, as I mentioned before, sets the resale value, the maximum sale price, at a percentage of market. That calculation was done, and the Executive Office of Housing and Living Communities came to us and said it will be impossible for anyone at or below 80% AMI to afford that home. Just the numbers wouldn't work. The purchase price would be just under $400,000. That size home at 80% AMI and with current interest rates would, under current programs, would be between $220,000 and $229,000. And so someone with that level of income and only $75,000 in assets would never be able to facilitate it. So we started the process of purchasing the property. The state came back and offered us an alternative, which was to allow them to market the property at the current program price, and we would simply buy down part of the difference in the sale prices at closing. So rather than purchasing the property, recording the deed, taking on insurance costs, carrying costs, and then turning around and selling the property at the new lower rate. There's a big difference there. That we could simply allow EOHLC to market the property at the current affordable rate, and when they find they're not having trouble finding eligible buyers submitting for it, that when the property closes, we would simply provide the subsidy directly through escrow to the seller. And in doing that option, EOHLC contributed $20,000 to that buy down. So that is the course of, it's the most cost-effective way to return the convert the property, keep it affordable, and convert it to the current standards of affordability.
That's
It
what I
will
was gonna
remain
ask.
affordable in perpetuity,
Okay.
and going forward, the price will follow the current formulas for 80% or below AMI.
Well done.
And so the most it's been learning curve
Yeah.
about rules and
Sounds great.
programs, and the logistics are a bit complex, but it's the most, it's a fairly large subsidy. It's roughly $150,000 of buy down. But this is the most, you know, we estimated our cost of holding the property for 90 days in the $12,000 to $20,000 range. And so we voted at the last meeting to do the buy down, and because at a certain maximum value that EOHLC requested, with the stipulation that if interest rates continue to drop, which will increase the sell price, reduce the subsidy, that we would hold those funds for the buyer for up to 180 days to offset some of the capital maintenance costs that are needed, that we would have had to pay for in addition to the buy down, had we owned the property.
Sure.
Right. And so it works out for the seller, it works out for the buyer, and it's the least costly option for the trust.
Remind me, is this an over 55 community?
This is not.
It is not.
This
Okay.
is not.
I could not.
So this is family housing,
Okay.
and so
Great.
job well done to the trustees.
Yeah. Well done.
and the cooperation of the folks at HLC. So also very briefly at our last meeting, we started talking about some preliminary concepts for a couple of properties in town where there might be the option to do net new development of affordable housing or moderate income housing that meets the needs from the senior assessment for downsizing options. At this point, we're looking at layout and building style and how it fits on the property. Decisions about whether they would be sold as owner units or built as rental units to be determined. But as those meetings get processed and we continue to update our website within the Newtown website infrastructure, those drawings will be up. There are, for one of the properties, there's a residential abutter. Our property abuts two sides of his property. And the street is the third, and a driveway to another property is the fourth. So it's pretty impactful for him. We are reaching out to him directly to make him aware that these are the concepts that we're currently thinking about, so that there's no surprise down the road, and he's comfortable with, and even in the initial concept drawings, we've added fencing and landscaping too, to protect his privacy and noise levels and stuff like that. But we want to make sure that he's aware and comfortable is the most highly impacted abutter. So that's moving forward as well.
Good work.
Fun stuff.
Thank you, Ellen.
Just a couple of quick updates. So, update on Hockomock Pond Reuse Committee. We met. We had been on a little bit of a hiatus. We were waiting for the Yukon TAB program report to be completed. There was some additional clarification that was needed on that. We got that. The committee has reviewed it. It's not yet posted to the webpage or the website. It will be. So thank you for that reminder, Alan, as you were talking about the trust work. So the committee had an opportunity to review that. Chief Purcell also attended the meeting, gave an update on the rec, which was just a kind of brief update of where things stand. And the committee, there wasn't a vote, but the discussion was that the next meeting, which will be in mid-January, is that we would be preparing bid documents for security fencing and kind of that phased approach that we talked about at the last town meeting. So anyway, that's where that stands right now. There is funding that's already been voted to support that, but ultimately, we don't know where the bid documents will land. And I do think I've said to the committee, I think any work of that committee needs to be, while they are separate projects, needs to be kind of in alignment with the work of the rec. We don't want to be, putting up fencing and then we're doing construction there, or doing trails and the work has to be redone. So a ways to go, but that is the work of that committee. And then I also sit on the CMMPO as the Northeast Subregion elected representative, and that subregion, just as a reminder, is Northborough, Shrewsbury, West Boylston, Boylston, Westborough, and Berlin. I was happy to see that as part of that discussion, the Hastings to Thomas Newton Drive project was mentioned. In January, Chris and team will be coming forward to talk about that being on the tip for FY 2029. So we all know that's a long process, but as we heard from I think it was our last meeting, it's great to hear that the town is getting into that process because it does take time. Also interesting, I had made a note and didn't make the correlation until Mary and Maureen were talking about ADA as it relates to the library, as it relates to the catchment area for CMRCP, of which Westborough is one of those communities. There are almost 12.5% of individuals have some sort of cognitive, hearing, or vision disability. And the largest component of that 12.5% is 5% with cognitive issues. So then I was like, our senior needs assessment and the work that we're doing there is so important. So I thought that was just kind of an interesting piece of information. And then I will share with the board the Representative Sujatha, who some of you may remember, she's presented here before, gave a great presentation on the work of CMRCP around kind of the transportation activities overview, really gave a great visual of the work that they do, and there were several different components that I flagged that were of interest in terms of the Council on Aging funding they do around transportation. And I'm not sure kind of to what extent we tap into that, or we can. That might be more WRTA and not related to Westborough. But also they have a whole initiative around regional aging and dementia-friendly communities. So again, I think it's work being done. And as we build out our work on the aging initiative here in Westborough, certainly resource we want to, be looking at. I'm sure Christy and team are looking at that. So I'll share the presentation with the board, and all their documents are public, and you can dig as deep as you'd like. Okay.
Shelby, thank you very much.
You bet.
Nothing for me. The Library Building Committee was here today to give a much better update than I would have given. So thank you to them. Say thank you to Westborough TV for all they do. Thank you for everything they've done all year long, and Happy New Year to everyone. And with that,
And Merry Christmas to those who celebrate.
Yeah, you bet.
can I get a motion?
I'll make a motion to enter into executive session under Mass General Law, Chapter 38, Section 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining with firefighters union if the chair determines that an open meeting would have a detrimental impact on the board's position. And under Mass General Law, Chapter 38, Section 21A6, to consider the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property at 700 Freiburg Parkway if the chair declares that an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the board's negotiating position. And under Mass General Law, Chapter 38, Section 21A7, to act under the authority of the Select Board to approve executive session minutes of November 27th, 2023, November 28th, 2023, November 30th, 2023, and December 6th, 2023, sessions 1 and 2.
Thank you. I declare that an open meeting would have a detrimental effect on the board's negotiating, litigating, and bargaining position. The board will not be reconvening in open session after executive session. Can I get a second?
Second,
Roll call vote.
Johnson, yes.
Edinburgh, yes?
Welch, yes?
Marshall, yes?
And Keo, yes. Thank you very much. Good night.